one of the best decisions that we think that you can make for your undergraduate career here at Tulane. You are about to embark on a lot of exciting adventures. So my name is Annie Gibson. I am the director of the Office of Study Abroad, and I am here with advisor Julie Gamzee and advisor Meredith Connolly and peer advisor Taylor. So this presentation today is going to help you think through our kind of the next steps, logistics, the stuff that you need to do right away to kind of get forward on thinking about your secondary application, thinking about the logistics that you have to do for Tulane to make sure that all your paperwork and the bureaucratic process is in line. So try to stay with us. It's the nuts and bolts piece of your study abroad. We want you to get excited about all of the amazing cultural experiences that you're about to have. But it also is important that you sort of know logistically the way that some of these things work. Yeah. So with that, all of you. So how many of you have had an appointment with one of the study abroad advisors prior to your study abroad? Okay, good. So it's good that you kind of create a relationship with our office, whether it's in one-on-one appointments, whether it's through email, however you want to reach out for us. If you're starting to feel that there are questions that you're not sure about, feel free to reach out for us. Through email, you can find going on our website, you can find us. We always have walk-in advising at Global Cafe, which is every Tuesday in the mezzanine of the LBC. By now, you've all received your notification letter that you have been accepted to study abroad. And so there's a couple of things that I want you to remember about that letter. One thing is that you now should start your secondary application. So you've been approved to study abroad through Tulane. You also must be approved to study abroad through your program or your host institution. So at this point, you all should be completing that application as we speak. And if you have any questions about whether or not your program has a secondary application or does not have a secondary application, please let us know. All of them do except for Madrid, Bologna,
DIS,
Educo, and DIS.
Yeah.
So those are the four that do not have a kind of a separate secondary application process that you should have also received notification about that. But if you're not one of those, then you should be completing a secondary application and you will have to be accepted by your host institution.
Yeah, and maybe one quick note about that secondary application is that a lot of your applications require what's called they have different names, but some are called homeschool nominations, some are called advisor approval, advisor authorization. Basically, it's a very quick process for Meredith or I to sign off for you and say that we've approved you to study abroad. So if you come to that and you need help, just let us know. You can email us or just simply list us in the portal, our email and our name, and we'll be happy to complete that for you.
Great, yeah, and that's important to note. So if you haven't met with our office before and so you feel like you don't have a study abroad advisor yet, you're not sure who to pick, remember that you can pick either name or come make a relationship with one of the advisors in our office.
We also have another advisor, Joe Michel. He's not here today, but if you have spoken with him before, that's great. He just couldn't make it. So we're 3 advisors in total.
The other secondary piece, so one, you're going to complete the application. The other post-decision things that you have to do is to sign back into your Tulane application. Make sure that you've filled out the emergency contact information. And then once you are accepted and you have decided from your secondary application and you've decided, yes, you're going abroad, you need to go in and change your status to committed within the system. So those are 2 things within your Tulane Study Abroad application for you to do. And then once you, a little later down the line when you make your travel arrangements, you will put your travel information into the system as well. So those are some important pieces of information in that notification letter that you received, and these should be completed as quickly as possible in the secondary stage of your application process. And a final note, many of you applied for OSA scholarships, and just a heads up that you will be hearing about those soon. We hope to get those notifications out by October the 29th.
Yeah. And something else, so y'all received your notification from us, right? That's why you're here. And within that email, we had lots of links and important information. Some of that information was this right here. So in addition to this session right here, our office is also doing these individual pre-departure conference workshops, which are not this week, but the next week and the week after. So the next 2 weeks. And y'all need to sign up for at least 2 of them. You can see these are a little synopsis of the themes of each workshop. And I think these are really important moments for y'all to think more about like your own intercultural learning abroad, thinking about these topics abroad, preparing for them, how they're going to be relevant to you and to your peers. And so if you have questions about that, let us know, but you should definitely RSVP for 2 of these workshops. And the RSVPs are on OrgSync. So, yeah.
You can follow the link below to see the full description online if you want to. And so while today is more of the nuts and bolts of the Tulane application process and your secondary application process, these will help you think more in depth about your particular study abroad location and how what it will be like to study abroad there. So to explore certain issues around identity, power, privilege, health, safety in the context of your host country.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so academics, very important, right? That's what y'all are going to be doing. You're going to be having fun abroad, but also, most importantly, studying, right? And so it's really interesting because you all are going to be abroad in various formats. So like, for example, some of you are going to be directly enrolling in a host university, right? Where you study in a classroom setting with a professor, just like you would here at Tulane. And then some of you are going to be studying abroad through program providers, where you're with other U.S. students at the Program Provider Study Center, but then you also directly enroll. And some of you are going to be on these very specific cohort programs where you're only with other U.S. students and you're taught by local faculty and whatnot, right? And so in all of these different scenarios, it's really important to keep in mind that the way that people do college and education abroad can be very, very different from what you've experienced here at Tulane. You know, here you have a syllabus and you know what to expect for every single class of the year typically, right, or the semester. And so you know what assignments you have to do and where to get those assignments and how to find the readings and how to do all of that. And so some of you will experience that on your programs, but some of you won't. You know, some of you will show up to class the first day and you might receive a reading list from the professor, and the professor might say, okay, you have to read these 10 books by the end of the semester and come prepared to discuss them and then take an exam about them all at the end of the semester, right? So that's like completely different from what you've experienced at Tulane. And so just be prepared to kind of encounter that and to have a new experience academically, and one in which you guys are going to have a lot more of independence and autonomy and kind of directing your own studies for yourself and creating your own study schedule and balancing that with like more of the fun aspect, right? And so studying and enjoying and exploring your host city. So just keep in mind, academics abroad are going to be and can be quite different from what you've experienced so far.
And the registration process as well, as you're both doing this application and then moving forward registering for courses, you may find that it's a little bit more frustrating than you would hope, trying to figure out, okay, what courses are actually offered, what can I take, what can't I take, and so just try to remember that the different ways of doing college are part of your learning experience. But then the other thing is that you guys have to become the cultural brokers to help those that are at Tulane understand what you did abroad. And that piece is really important. So there's one is just kind of getting yourself adapted to be able to have the best experience and understand that things are not going to work differently. But then 2, you all have to translate what you do abroad back at Tulane. So we're going to give you a few recommendations about this. So first of all, before you go.
Yeah, so before you go, and this was should have been part of your application process on the Tulane side of things, right? So like meeting with your academic advisor in the Academic Advising Center and with your major advisors, right? To ensure that you can go abroad and progress towards graduating in a timely manner. So making sure study abroad, whether it's for a semester or a year or a semester and a summer, fits into your academic progression. So that was one piece. If you guys have any doubts about that at this point, you should absolutely meet with your academic and major advisors prior to studying abroad, like prior to leaving campus. It's a really good idea to do that. And also if you have any doubts about the credits you're getting abroad, that's something else to think about.
And I would say on that one, if you're in a program that you don't know exactly what the courses are, but say you're in political science and you know you need a 3,000 level political science, but you don't really even know what courses will be offered at your university, what you want to figure out from your major advisor is what kind of content needs to be in that course for you to get credit, so that when you go abroad, you can start looking for that kind of credit. For those of you taking language as well, remember that just taking language abroad is not necessarily going to translate back as language credit. It needs to be a literature course, a culture, or an art course in order to transfer back as language credit. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Right. And so just how y'all were required to have at least a minimum 3.0 GPA to be accepted to study abroad. In some of your cases, if you were applying to certain universities, you might have had to have had a higher GPA, such as 3.2 or 3.5, but you do need to maintain the minimum requirement while you are abroad. In addition to that, you do need to make sure you are in compliance at all times with our academic policies, as well as the academic policies of the host university or program provider. So, for example, we require you to enroll in a minimum of 12 credits while you study abroad, right? That's to make sure that you maintain your full-time enrollment as a Tulane student. So again, you have to be enrolled in at least 12 credits. However, you might go on some programs where their minimum requirement is 15 credits or so. So if their requirement trumps ours, then you do have to enroll in whatever their minimum is. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And then in addition to which, while you guys are abroad, before you go, what you need to do this semester is register for what is called a CRN. It's a 12 credit placeholder that you register for in Gibson. So just like you would normally make a class schedule if you were to be on campus, because you're not doing that, what you're going to do instead is input this CRN code. So I recommend y'all take note of this, because you won't be registering for classes at Tulane because you won't be here. You're going to register for this 12 credit placeholder. And what this does, it ensures that you remain enrolled as a Tulane student. It ensures that your billing continues to remain the same, etc., and that when you come back, it's a very seamless transition back into being on campus.
And it also triggers disbursement of your financial aid. So
While you're abroad, so as Julie mentioned, make sure that you're in a full course load at Tulane and at your host institution. If you have any questions while you're abroad, email our office to ask. Talk to your host institution, whoever is in charge of your international group, to make sure that you're fully enrolled. Then also a couple of other things to note: your grades will appear on your transcript, but they're not going to factor into your GPA. We often get that question from students, and the reason we do that is because we understand that, and your professors and various departments also understand that the way that people do grading systems is also very different across different locations, different institutions, different countries, and so keep that in mind too. You may go to a place where getting a C is the rest of the students in your class are going to be celebrating, and so thinking about that, thinking about what is the culture around grades where I'm going, what does that mean as part of the kind of the learning that you'll engage with while you're abroad.
So, for example, from personal experience, I studied abroad in France, and so the typical grading scale that's used in French classrooms at the university level is like a 1 to a 20, and 20 is usually not something that you'll ever hope or dream of getting. Like, my professors would tell me, 20 est pour Dieu, mais pas pour toi. So, like, 20 is for God, but it's not for you. And that's like a thing that was said to me very often. So, in a very blunt French way. But so getting like an 18 even, or like a 17 was sort of stellar and out of the normal expectation. So that kind of thing, just take into consideration, we do have a way that we evaluate grades depending on what country you're coming from and the different scale that we use depending on that, but just keep in mind that grading systems are subjective across different countries.
So if we're taking classes that will go towards our major or minors, if the GPA from there does not factor into our GPA here, how will that impact our major or minor GPA for taking classes?
It won't impact your GPA, but the grades are going to come back as a letter grade on your transcript. transcripts, like if you're applying to grad school, et cetera, they'll be able to see what grade you got in the course abroad, but it's not going to be factored into the GPA.
And keeping that in mind as well on that note, and I might be jumping ahead, getting into the next section, but what we really want you guys to think about is articulating the value of your study abroad experience outside of letter grades, right? I think it's so easy for us to get caught up in like, oh, I need to get an A, or I need to get a B, or oh God, like I got a C, that's terrible. I mean, for some people, C is really good. I think it can be really good. You know, we all have our bars and our expectations, right? And keeping in mind that you might not get, if you normally get A's and B's on campus, you might be getting B's and C's or even a D abroad, you know? And keeping in mind that your study abroad experience is so much more than the letter grade that comes back onto your transcript. Yeah.
And then finally, the Tulane SU policy, it applies the same way as it does here on Tulane's campus. So what that means is that you have 10 weeks from the start date of your program that you can decide whether or not you can take a class SU. And the process for that is first to touch base with our office. So shoot an email to your study abroad advisor or to OSA at Tulane and see if the course that you are applying, that you would like to apply the SU for is approved, and make sure that you're in the time frame. And so we do that. We evaluate to make sure you're within that 10-week time frame. And then if you are, then you move on to to work with your academic advisor, who will make sure that whatever course you're hoping to take SU won't impact your kind of plan for graduation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, so academics when you return from abroad, right? So when you go on a Tulane approved program, you will automatically receive general elective credits towards graduating, right? So you will receive credits towards that total amount that you need to graduate. If you want anything to count towards a major, a minor, or a core curriculum requirement, such as like humanities, fine arts, Western, non-Western perspectives, that is when you need to seek approval from your major or minor advisor or from your academic advisor, if it's for a core curriculum requirement. So when you come back from abroad, what you're going to do, and this is later, but it's good to know, you're going to fill out what's called a course equivalency form, where you write the name of the course you took abroad, what it equates to at Tulane, and then your advisor signs off on it. So basic rule of thumb is that you never ever want to guess or assume that a course you're taking abroad is going to count towards a major, minor, or core curriculum requirement. Even though we do like the official approval process after you come back, beforehand what you want to do is run the course by your major, minor, or academic advisor. You know, even when you're abroad, because a lot of you won't finalize what you're taking until 1 or 2 weeks into the semester abroad, so you might be emailing them and saying, hi, so-and-so, I'm here, and these are the classes I want to take. Does this look like it might satisfy my humanities requirement, right? So making sure that you're kind of getting that more informal pre-approval from them before officially or solidifying your schedule. And then, again, so you'll get general elective credit for everything else that you take abroad, and courses will appear as 5,000 level electives on your transcript. And then, in addition to that, going back to getting major, minor, or academic requirements fulfilled, what we highly, highly recommend is that you keep all syllabi, all exams, all quizzes, all homework, just like any written assignments that you've had from abroad, because sometimes it's not enough for your major or minor advisor to see the name of the course you're taking abroad. They might say, I need to see a syllabus because I need to see the content, or I can't approve this, I need to see the grades you earned for this course, right? So please do make sure that you keep this information. You can even scan it, once you get it on your phone, so you don't have to lug all this paperwork back and forth. But that's really important to keep in mind. And then when you return, you're going to complete a program evaluation, which is this pretty simple online program evaluation where you guys tell us all about your abroad experience, how your classes were, how your housing was, how the host institution or program provider was, how your intercultural learning experiences were while you were studying abroad. And this is really important to us. Truly, we really, really want to hear about your experiences, and we improve our programs and our portfolio and the experiences for future students based on the feedback that you guys give us. So that will come after. In addition to this, your grades from abroad will not come back until you complete this program evaluation. So towards the end of the semester, we'll be emailing you with that information so that you complete that. So just try to keep that in the back of your head.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, as you're thinking about kind of the planning of the translation of your coursework abroad back to Tulane, a couple of things about the syllabi and exams. So, for example, I directed our Tulane program in Cuba for many years, and in Cuba, students don't get a syllabus, nor do they get a reading list. They get nothing. And so, for students to be able to get courses approved when they return home, they basically have to rewrite their syllabus as the course goes. So make sure that you're paying attention. So so that you're taking notes and writing the bibliography. You'll have to be able to translate the course and the work that you did to your faculty back on campus. So keep that in mind with everything that you're doing abroad. That you guys are going to be the cultural brokers for people that may not know the education system. You guys will be the ones that have the knowledge of the education system, and so you'll be translating that back. So keep, again, emphasizing, keep those final papers, keep any kind of records of your academics, because you will need them in the moment that you're transferring courses back. And then finally, so the best honors theses that I have read always have to do with students who got very involved with their project during study abroad. I can list the top five honors theses I've read, and they have been about, they've developed out of someone getting inspired by something that happened abroad and then them working through that. And so I would say that now is actually the time for you all to start thinking, what is it that you hope to find or learn where you're going abroad? And start thinking, what resources might you gather now to start thinking about that? Because four months goes by really fast. And if it takes you the first month or 2 months to kind of figure out, you know, how to move and get about and figure out where you're going in the city, it leaves you a smaller amount of time to actually get in depth in the information that you want to learn. So right now is when you should be learning about, you know, researching what are the cultural things that are interesting to you. Is there an NGO that you want to intern with or volunteer with? How can, you know, what resources at Tulane do we have that might help you further explore something in your host country?
Actually, Taylor, if we can put you on the spot really quick, because I know what you were doing abroad was very like nation thematic to your studies at Tulane. Can you share a little bit just about like what you did and then how you brought that back to Tulane and incorporated that?
Approval or just like coursework?
Sorry, that was vague. Like with public health and your research. And all
Okay.
that.
I'm Taylor. I went to India for my first semester. So I was on a cohort program, so it was like 14 Americans, and we took classes at a program center, and it was through SIT, so we either got the chance to do an internship or an ISP. If you do SIT, ISP is like their big thing. It's an independent study project, so you can go anywhere, wherever you are. So anywhere in India. I chose to go to the mountains, and I did research on holistic healing methods in terms of chronic disease, and that ended up being my capstone. So I did a lot of planning before I left. Like I did a lot of research because I was anxious about like getting back and not having any of my credits count. And because I did all of that research, like when I got back, the transfer process was a lot easier for me. So from my abroad, I'm getting capstone credit. I'm probably getting second tier service. I'm petitioning 3 different courses, and I got writing intensive. So you can get a lot accomplished abroad. You just have to plan effectively. And if it's field work, make sure that you meet with the director of your undergraduate program. Make sure that you meet with your major advisor. Make sure that you meet with your academic advisor. All of those things are going to help you in any type of, like not just syllabus, but any type of textbook. Like I know they gave us these big readers when we got to India, and they were disgustingly huge, and they took up like 10 pounds of me trying to bring them back. But I brought them back because if I needed them to prove I did the type of work that I did, I needed to have those to reference. So y'all just really need to be diligent about saving everything, and also like discerning what you want to accomplish abroad, because abroad can mean any and everything. It can mean a start to your career, it can mean a start to your research path. It's what you want it to be, so just be really conscious when you're thinking about that. It's going to be a great experience, yes, but it could be the beginning of work that you continue for the rest of your life. So, you know, not like trying to scare you, but it really can be the start of something great. So just, make sure you're diligent, keeping track of everything, saving everything, and yeah, that's the only thing I can say. I did a lot of coursework for public health, but my program was focused specifically in public health.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So next is important for you all to understand how the finances work for study abroad. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there are two main payments that happen. One is your tuition and one is your housing. Your tuition, you are all here because you're on a Tulane approved program, which means that you will pay as if you were going to Tulane. You will be billed by Tulane just the same. So any scholarships, any financial aid, they will all apply. So again, meet with your financial aid advisor about this. The thing that varies is housing, and it varies by country and location. There are certain countries where housing may be more expensive than Tulane. There are certain countries where it may be less expensive than Tulane. There are certain programs where the housing is built into the program fee. There are certain programs where you guys will be in charge of finding your own apartment in the city where you're going. So it's important for you to understand how your housing works, and then how it will be billed. Will it be billed from the program provider that you're using? Are you going to need to bring pocket money to be able to pay for housing? How does your housing work? Taylor, do you have, and you want to talk a little about your housing? So one of the big things is trying to make the decision about some programs you may have already defined what your housing looks like. But others you get to choose on from different options. Do I want to homestay? Do I want to live in a dorm? So maybe you can talk a little bit through that.
So like I said, I did a cohort program because of that, and because of the country that I was in, homestay was the only option. I absolutely loved my homestay. The housing cost was folded into like the tuition that was charged, so I didn't really have to worry about that. They gave us a budget of like pocket money to bring, but in terms of like paying housing, that was included in our tuition already. Some programs will give you the option to do homestay or stay in the dorms or like live with other Americans and like alternative housing. I highly encourage you to do homestay if what you're looking for is cultural immersion. It's not the same living somewhere versus like living with a family. And like the key to a successful homestay is to be open and to communicate. So a story I like to tell people is that my homestay mom would always try to give me more food, and I would be like, no, I'm okay. But in their context, I'm okay was like, okay, I want more. So every time I would say I'm okay, she would give me more food. So I had to learn to say like, no, thank you, or like, oh, I'm good, like I don't want any more food. Please, yeah, like it's just like these little phrases that are gonna be miscommunications, and they end up, honestly, if you're open and like willing to experience the country and the culture, being funny experiences that you can bring back and share with people. But yeah, I think homestay is great. I still talk to my homestay mom. She comments on all my Facebook pictures. She's adorable. I love her. You should do it.
Do you guys have any homestay anecdotes?
Yeah. So I'm a Tulane alum, and when I was a student, I studied abroad in São Paulo in Brazil for a year, and I lived with a host family the entire year, the same host family. And it was awkward at first. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's uncomfortable, and I think that's a valid fear to have. Not, a lot of students don't choose a host family experience, I think, because they're afraid of that awkwardness. But it's these awkward moments where you become closer, and like Taylor was saying, you end up laughing about them, and they become these like funny memories and bonding moments. But I mean, I'm super biased because I had an incredible experience with my host family. My host family, and they're also, when we say host family, it's not always like the traditional, like 2 parents and siblings, little siblings, whatever, right? Like you can have all different kinds of family models. So I had a host mom, and she was divorced, so it was just her, and my host brother, Victor, who was like about my age, so that was amazing because I got to meet so many other people my age. He really helped me like socially to make friends and to do that in Portuguese, like it was amazing. But I've since been back to Brazil to visit my host family. I talk to them like every day. They're like my second family. So like Taylor, I highly recommend that. And I knew people as well who had negative experiences with their host family, or maybe it just wasn't quite the right fit, and the programs are always very responsive in helping you to find maybe a new host family, or to figure out what are those difficulties you're experiencing with a host family, or not even just with a host family, like living in a dorm or an apartment, and how to kind of work through those discomforts in any housing kind of experience.
This is like the homestay plug extraordinaire. 'Cause
Yeah,
I also
sorry.
lived with a homestay family when I was studying abroad in France. And I will agree that like at the beginning, probably a lot of what students are uncomfortable about or nervous about is maybe a reduction in independence as a result of living with a host family. Like you're abroad, you want to go and meet people, you want to go out at night maybe. But I would say in most countries, there's a difference in perception of giving more freedom to young adults. So in my experience, my host family was not at all restrictive of me having a life independent of their home. So it's about, again, setting those clear communications and knowing what the rules are and being respectful, but generally speaking, I would say the fear of losing your independence when you're abroad is sort of an empty one in most cases. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I was just going to say, if the housing fee is included in the general fee for the program, is it still just going to be all on Tulane bills, or is it somehow a separate line?
They'll separate it out. So
Okay, got it.
so the program. So if you're going through a program provider, they'll have a programming fee, which will include experiential learning stuff, housing, insurance. They'll sort of tell you. You'll be able to see what they'll have. Any other questions about that? And so in terms of thinking about housing, consider all of your options, but at the end of the day, you want to, whatever housing choice you decide for yourself, if your goal is to really explore and understand at a deep level the place where you're going, think about how your housing impacts that. So if you choose to live in an apartment with 5 other Tulane students, that's okay. I'm not saying do that or don't do that, but how does that experience affect how you are going to understand that local city? And so if you are going to choose an apartment with 5 other Tulane students, how are you going to break out of that Tulane bubble and explore? Or if you do stay in a homestay and then you decide to travel every single weekend, how is that going to impact your ability to make local friends? So just kind of think about those things because the out of school experiences are going to be just as impactful to you as what happens at the university when you're studying abroad.
Okay, health. This is a big one, right? So your health, and soon we'll get into safety, but starting with your health, y'all should definitely be doing research that's specific to your, not just your country, but your location, your specific region where you're going to be. So know about the healthcare resources, know what's available to you, research local conditions that may complicate health issues. So for example, if you had asthma and you were going to a place that was very highly polluted, thinking about that, how might that affect you? Just kind of thinking about these things that you might not think about otherwise. And also with regards to health, if you currently need any specific health services, whether they be mental health services or certain medications that you take that you'll also need abroad, plan that now, right? So what we always say to students is be familiar with what medications are legal and illegal in your host country. You might take something here like Concerta or something, right? And that might be illegal in your host country. So just being aware of these things, not assuming that everything's going to be the same with regards to the healthcare system, because it won't. It will be very, very different. But do know that your host university or program provider, the organization that's supporting you abroad, is there in fact to support you, right? And so if y'all are struggling, if you need to go to the doctor or you need certain services, or if there's just anything you need to be very communicative with them about that, right? So if you're not feeling well, and it's something that's escalated, talking to your on-site staff about that. You can, of course, email us, but ultimately we can't do anything for you physically because we're here and you're there, right? So you guys need to be kind of ambassadors for yourself and for your own health care and really stepping up with regards to that.
And I would say also, this is something that will kind of be touched on in one of the identity-based PDOs that's also going to happen. But just briefly, I'll mention that there are also different perspectives surrounding health and healthcare globally, so that's something just to keep in mind. Like, for example, students that go to Amsterdam, for example, there's a much less of a culture of prescriptive healthcare in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands than there is here. So like giving out medication is not necessarily something that happens as easily in certain countries as it is in the US. Like if you go to a pharmacist and say that you have a cold, here they may give you something, you know, in the Netherlands they might say like drink some tea, get over it, like have a nap. It's just
No, that's so true.
Yeah.
Same thing in I can say from personal experience, in Sweden and in Denmark. You're not going to very easily get an antibiotic from a doctor if you're sick. You know, it's a much different kind of culture and process that you should also be prepared and think about, okay, if maybe it's not so easy for me to get things, do I need to be prepared and take a certain antibiotic with me, or do I need to kind of think ahead with that? And then as well, if you have any Goldman accommodations or any kinds of campus accommodations through the Goldman Center currently that you would also need abroad, that is something that you should be working to implement now. So you can let our office know, but most importantly, you should be letting your specific program provider or host institution know. In addition to this, a lot of students have accommodations that they may not really use on campus, and so they don't think they need to use it abroad. For example, like if you had extra time on an exam and you don't really use it here, maybe you do, maybe you don't, I highly recommend going through the process to make sure that you can use it abroad, because a lot of students find that they'll get abroad and they're like, oh wow, just the circumstances of all of this, of navigating, taking an exam in a foreign language, or just feeling overwhelmed, like I wish I had had my extra time on this exam, right? And so whatever the accommodations might be, do make sure that you kind of get this process going now. You don't want to wait to do this until you get abroad. It'll be much more difficult, maybe impossible. Yeah, and again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, if you currently work with a physician in the United States or here in New Orleans and you need to pre-plan communicating with them while you're abroad, make sure that's something that you set up now, and just thinking these things through before you leave.
And so this health insurance is not the most sexy topic to be talking about when you're talking about study abroad, but you all should be able to answer the question, if you got sick, what would you do? Where would you go? How would it work? How would you pay for it? How does your insurance work? So you need to be able to understand when you get sick abroad, you know, what's your network of people that you would call? Is it who is the person abroad that would help you navigate that foreign system? And then also, how does your insurance work when you're abroad? In some cases, it may be a reimbursement situation where you'll need to pay up front, and then you'll present your receipts later. In some cases, it may be covered already, but you need to know how your insurance is going to work. So in terms of insurance, that's the one question I want you to, everyone, before you get on the plane to go abroad, make sure that you can answer. You know how your insurance works, because when you break your foot or when you get a parasite and you're throwing up and you're having to do it in another language, you don't want to have to be figuring that stuff out now. You already want to know how that works. So a couple of things that are required. You must be able to demonstrate that you have adequate health insurance in the U.S. and abroad. Why do you have to have both? Because if you do have an issue where you break your foot abroad and then you're going to come home and you have to have continuous care, you must be covered in the U.S. and abroad. So you need to make sure that you're able to show that. And there are 3 options that you can use to do this. And so you'll need to do research with your particular program to see what is the scenario that works for you. One scenario that you may use is to use GeoBlue, which is the two-lane international insurance that we have to help cover you while abroad. So if you're on a program that does not offer its own insurance and you don't have another option that you're thinking about for international insurance, you can always go to GeoBlue for the international part of your insurance. Yes? Getting there, hold on.
Yeah.
The second option is that your international insurance can come through your program provider. So you go through CIEE, for example. They use an international insurance called INEX. So if you register on the CIEE program, you're automatically going to have INEX insurance. The third option is that your domestic insurance provider, whether that's United through Tulane, whether that's your parents' program, they may cover you both domestically and internationally if you call them. So those are kind of the three options that you need to figure out on my program. How does my insurance work? How does it work? Which one of these scenarios do I have? And what would happen? So if you do need to register for GeoBlue insurance, it is a health insurance signature document that would in your application, right?
Yeah, so
And-
it's within your application. So y'all have actually already signed this, and so indicating that you'll have adequate coverage. So if you do decide that you want to purchase GeoBlue, go back into your Tulane application, and there's these signature forms, and so there's the one called health insurance, and there's a direct link in there to the GeoBlue page to purchase that.
Right. And this is the school code that you would need that you'll put in to register for the Tulane GeoBlue. And then finally, you must complete the annual health waiver form, the Tulane health waiver, just as if you're on campus. So whether or not you're using the Tulane insurance or you're not using, you need to fill out the health waiver.
Yeah. Okay.
Taylor, do you have any?
I think you might have an interesting story to share.
So Murphy's Law is my life. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I got bronchitis twice while I was in India. I had a parasite. Yeah, I'm fine now, but a lot of stuff happened. I encourage you to look at the details of what exactly is covered in each of the insurances. SIT had international SOS, which was great. I used that every time I had to go to the doctor. And also, like, the idea of medicine, like they were talking about, can be different. So when I had the parasite, I was in the mountains of Dharamsala, and I went to a Tibetan hospital where they employed both biomedicine and Tibetan medicine. So, like, I had holistic health healing treatments on top of having, like, an IV, and realized that the atmosphere of a hospital might be very, very different than what you're used to. Like, people laugh, but I literally felt like I was in a Civil War hospital because, like, I had, like, a coat hanger, and they just kind of threw the IV over it, and they were like, okay, and then they didn't ask me my name or anything. Like, everything was sanitary, but they were just like, you're sick, okay, and they, like, poked me with a needle and put the IV in. They didn't know my name, they didn't know anything. It's just very, very different. So, like, if you get sick, be prepared for those differences. Like, you're gonna be fine, but in the moment, it can be a very, very scary thing. Also, look at the currency exchange. Like, the dollar to rupee difference is very different. So, I was in the hospital for like 3 days, and I want to say maybe I paid $30 for everything. Like, the stay, the medicine. I had a lot of medicine. I had like 12 different bags of different anti-parasitics. But yeah, I would just say look under the different insurances. GeoBlue is great. It covers everything. If you have like all coverage insurance through your program, you don't need to buy that. But just like be cognizant, and also my program gave me like an emergency contact number. Your program might not give that to you, but that can come in handy, especially if you're in some type of emergency situation. So make sure because your phone will die, and like you will be on a corner somewhere in a foreign country freaking out. Make sure you have the necessary numbers for emergency situations written down somewhere on your person, so you will be able to call somebody if everything hits the fan.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into our safety and security. Yes.
Another
Okay.
sexy topic.
Oh yeah. Okay. So safety and security. Before you go, just like y'all are gonna do some research on the health coverage, healthcare aspect. Do some research on travel.state.gov to learn about your destination, right? See what's going on there. See what the different issues are that's going on. Kind of just, become familiar with that so that when you get there and there's a protest, you're not like, whoa, this is unheard of, or whatever it might be, right? Then something else you can do is enroll in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, or STEP, which is through the U.S. State Department of State. And this is actually really easy. It's the kind of thing where you do it now, it takes you a minute, and it's an amazing tool that you have in your back pocket for your entire time abroad. So if there were to be some kind of political upheaval, or even something small like a protest that might be high risk, if you're enrolled in the STEP program, the U.S. Department of State will contact you via email or whatever the contact information is and let you know that these things are going on. So, for example, when I was in São Paulo in Brazil, I had enrolled in this program, and so there was like a very common area of São Paulo called Avenida Paulista where you would go shopping, and just like a normal common area to go by. But sometimes there would be protests, and so I would get these notifications from the STEP program saying, warning, today there's going to be a protest happening here, avoid these areas. So it's just like good to know. I wouldn't have known that otherwise, right? So kind of do this now, have it as a tool in your back pocket, and it'll help you out. And then in addition to that, so something that you will automatically be enrolled in is a fantastic service called Global Rescue. And so again, our office automatically enrolls you in this, but what you can do is download the Global Rescue, it's called the Grid app, to your phone. So this app has amazing features. It has what's called like a breadcrumb feature, for example, where if you're traveling while you're abroad, you can check in, and so basically like it tracks where you are, not in a creepy stalker kind of way, but just in like a safety way. You know, for example, we had students who were maybe studying abroad in France, but then they traveled in London when the bombings happened a few years ago, right? And so having something like this, where we can see where you are, is huge. It's very good. It's very, very good. Also just for you, for your peace of mind, right? To know that like someone's always got your back. You have this as a safety net. Just so you know, this is not health insurance. This is a referral service, however. So let's say you were traveling in the middle of Argentina in Mendoza and you got really, really sick, and just because, so you're traveling there, you're not living there, you like have no idea where to go for the doctor, you can call Global Rescue and they can refer you and help you find a doctor or a clinic or somewhere to go. So this is a fantastic thing. Again, you'll be automatically enrolled, but do yourself a favor now and download the app so that when you're abroad, you have this super handy.
So it is like really good for terrible emergency situations, like if you were, broke your leg, or, you were incredibly ill and needed to be basically transported back home to your home hospital. That's kind of the worst case scenario in which this will come in handy, but it's also really good for just basic things. So for example, if you were sick and you just went to the doctor for a diagnosis and they told you you had influenza, let's say, and you kind of were unsure of that diagnosis and you wanted somebody else, an English-speaking doctor, to give you another diagnosis, they have a 24/7 physician who you can call, and they'll request x-rays, they'll talk to medical professionals, and they'll give you a second opinion. So that's a really good free tool for you to use while you're abroad.
It's also important to know that like when you get these alerts, I don't know the policies on all programs, but at least for my program, you could not participate in any type of protest. You couldn't be around a protest. It was just a liability issue. So those alerts are good to have because you don't want to inadvertently end up in an area where a protest is happening, because even if it's not your fault, like you could be subject to get kicked out of your program for that, because like sometimes like, stuff happens and like, people get hurt or they die. So I know while I was in India, there was a lot of protest notifications. I still get them all the time, and it'll tell you like weather alert, protest is happening here. This many people are supposed to come, and then it'll also give you alert after the fact, like, oh, so many people were hurt, so many people did this. So just pay attention to those because they're important.
So I know many of you, today there's much talk about us living in this world risk society, right? Where we talk about risk, we talk about terrorism, we talk about these large natural disasters. I'm sure many of you had to have some difficult conversations with your parents, perhaps, to help them be okay with you deciding that you could go abroad. So because you're in this room, I know you know that the answer is not to close yourself up in your dorm room and never kind of go out and experience things. But what it does mean is that you all need to learn to grow a sense of kind of your common sense in your host country location. So realize that you're going to be operating in a system where you're not completely fluent in the codes around you. And so that means you have to take an extra level of care. Most of the things that happen most often that we receive reports about abroad are, students have let their guard down and they put their backpack on the back of their chair when they're having coffee and their computer is stolen, or they are walking alone at 2 a.m. on a deserted street and they're held up. These types of situations where if you use your common sense and understand ways of thinking about and navigating your local situation. Know your support system. So if you are going out, who knows where you're going and when? What are your kind of the groups that you're being with? How are you being allies for those around you that may have a different experience in your host country? So for example, traveling as a woman alone in India is much different than traveling as a man alone in India. And so thinking about being an ally for those around you is very important. Make sure that you know these security numbers. If you dial 911 while you're abroad, you're not going to get the police. Who do you call, right? What in your host country? What is the number that you would call if there was a disaster, if there was a major incident? Make sure that you know that. And finally, when you spend time paying attention to your on-site orientation, because the people there are trained in giving you the sort of important information that you need. If they say, don't go to this neighborhood or this bar at night, they're saying that for a reason, because there have been problems in the past.
Okay. Yeah, I know. We're zooming through some of this. This is of the last dry material, so you guys are doing great. But this is serious discipline. Y'all, even though you're going to be abroad and not on campus, you are still required to comply with all Tulane rules and regulations. So if you have any questions about what that might be, you can always take a nice read through the Tulane Student Conduct and Honor Code manual, right? But you are also required to comply with your host university or program provider's disciplinary student conduct and honor codes as well, right? So just be mindful of that. If something does happen abroad where you're in violation of either their or our honor code or student conduct code, it will be brought back with you to Tulane. So do keep that in mind.
And make sure that you follow local laws. We do not want you to be locked up abroad, because there's nothing that we can do for you. And Tulane will not be able to pay your bail if you get locked up abroad. And this is serious because this happens. And this happens not because someone commits a major crime, but because someone does not know the local customs. So, for example, you go out in Copenhagen and are visibly inebriated. That is something that in that context might get you put in jail. Or in Cuba, you smoke pot. That will get you put in jail. So having this awareness of the seriousness of actions is very important.
Yeah, and this is not like to scare you guys, but this is real. We could tell you stories anonymously, but of students that have been locked up abroad. So for real, ignorance is no excuse for the law. So do be cognizant of those things. Yes. Okay.
Logistics. So passport. Make sure your passport is valid with 6 months because you'll need that to be able to get in. Your country. You'll need that for getting your visa. Getting your visa is your responsibility, so you'll need to talk with the consulate so that you understand what the process is for that visa. For some of you, that might mean that you need to go in person to the consulate in Houston or New York, wherever your local consulate is. So be sure that you're familiar and you start this process early. It can be a very time-consuming process. But then again, just kind of putting your lens now on thinking about foreign cultures. Think about what would it be like if someone from your host country trying to come to the U.S. What is the visa process like in that case? So think about that a little bit as well. Money. Make sure that you understand the budget, the exchange rate. How you'll get access to money. Make sure before you leave you have called your bank and let them know about your ATM cards. Otherwise, you may get locked out if you don't let them know that your you're traveling if they see a charge from somewhere that they are unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then finally, we talked about the travel arrangements. If your phone dies, make sure that you know what you need to do when you arrive. So write it down. So when you get out of the airport in your new city, who is going to find you? Where are you going to go? Do you have it written down, the place that you're going to go? Are you looking for a particular person? Write down the address. Make sure that you're kind of taking charge of those logistical
Absolutely.
arrangements.
Yeah. Okay, so technology, really quickly, to communicate or not, right? So a lot of us are on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, etc., right? Snapchat. So thinking about a few things here. One is thinking about, y'all might be using Instagram a lot, for example, and documenting your time abroad. Think about what you're capturing in your stories, in your posts, and how that comes across to your audience, right? So y'all are going to be sharing for your family members, friends who aren't going abroad with you, you're going to be sharing insight into your host region and country with them, right, through social media. And so think very strongly about how you're capturing and portraying that, how that might come off, to your friends and family who are staying here. And in addition to, do you want to?
Sorry, guys.
Oh,
I was like, but no, I would say also another thing to think about with social media is not to compare experiences on social media. So obviously we tend to post the highlight reel, like the ideal experience that's happening to us on our social media. And it can be kind of difficult to see that if you're struggling with homesickness or you're struggling to adjust and you see all of your friends abroad like having this great picturesque time on Instagram. So just keep in mind that people are obviously posting the best of their experience. Like I would post pictures of me at the Eiffel Tower eating cheese, but I'm also not going to post pictures of me crying into an eclair in my room because I miss my mom. It's just not as compelling. So just keep in mind not to compare experiences, and that obviously social media is viewing your experience through a lens.
Yeah, no, she has a lot of pictures of herself crying on a baguette, so it's real. Yeah, like that.
And so with those crying experiences, culture shock is going to happen. And so it's important to kind of think about this. And so the process of culture shock, take a look at this graph, this kind of up and down. This is kind of what people see as the quintessential experience of study abroad. You get there, you're excited, everything is new, it seems great, and then some of the realities set in that you're getting catcalled on the street, or you're trying to understand what the teacher says in a foreign language as you can't, and so you have these lows, and then you start to feel like you can do a little better, and you come up. This in reality is a lot of this, up and down and up and down. And so it's important when you're having those lows that you realize that this too will pass. Sometimes in that moment of low, it seems like, my study abroad experience, I'm going to have to be here for 4 months and I'm feeling like this, I want to go home. You will come back, you will thank me if you pay attention that this is an up and down, and that it will pass. Because being able to kind of conceptualize sort of where am I today on this path of culture shock adjustment is really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so now is the time for you guys to start thinking through and doing the research about your host institution, about start doing your secondary application. Here are a few suggestions about some common things to learn and know about. Realize, especially for those of you that will be directly enrolling in a university, you're entering into what is the equivalent of 3rd and 4th year university students who already know what the local political system is, who already know. So if you are hoping to take a political science course abroad at the 3,000 level abroad, you need to have a base of understanding of your local host institution, because you're going to be with students that have that innately from living there. So make sure that you're doing the background research about the place that you're going so that you'll have the best success.
Yeah. And then moving forward for y'all, so there's a few things happening, a lot happening actually this week. So if you didn't get a handout, you should get one on the way out. But International Education Week is this week, right now. And so this is Our office, our whole unit, the Center for Global Education, puts this on. We have a lot going on. We have all different kinds of panels. We have info sessions. I know y'all are technically like, you know where you're going, right, for study abroad, but we also have info sessions. So if you are going, for example, to Tel Aviv, well, we have a representative from Tel Aviv University on campus this week. And so if you have specific questions for your program or your university, I highly recommend you check out our website for this week, global.tulane.edu/IEW, and see who's going to be here, make those connections with people. Again, y'all are pretty solidified in where you're going, but we do have the study abroad fair as well this Wednesday from 2 to 5. It's actually in this room. And so even though you know where you're going, do come by if you have questions, like specific questions for the program provider or host institution, because we'll have all of those reps here. They're traveling from Australia, Singapore, etc. to be here. So make sure you come to that if you have questions. And then we said this before, but you do need to attend at least 2 of our identity-based workshops, which are in the next couple of weeks. So sign up for those on OrgSync if you haven't already. If you guys don't know about this already, you should. This is a great resource. So on our website, we have study abroad returnees. We call them SARCs. Basically, they're students who have gone abroad through our office just like you. They've gone on semester programs, summer programs, year-long programs, and they are fantastic contacts for you. So I recommend reaching out to any of the SARCs that have gone to where you've gone, and they're great for anything like, what housing option did you choose? What insight or advice do you have about housing? What do you recommend with nightlife in the city? What museums are cheap on certain days? Kind of just getting that insight. That's really helpful. Yeah, anything else with that?
I think that's good. So this concludes the kind of the official presentation, but we are here to answer any questions that you all have.